Dennis Broad. So you studied political science, philosophy, Western civilization, and law at Pennsylvania State and Rutgers universities, right?
That's right.
Yes.
Guilty. Guilty as charged.
The author, who are you, Dennis Broad, was privileged to have raised 3 children and to have had a fulfilling career in law, as well as an entrepreneur and elected public officials. Now, this book, called The Essence of Ethical Pragmatism, the common sense philosophy which give people common sense to make the right judgment. So, can I ask you some questions?
Certainly.
Yes. And what is ethical pragmatism, if I pronounced it right?
Oh, it's pragmatism. Pragmatism is not a new concept, but it came into public knowledge in the 19th century with certain philosophers examining how people acted in certain ways. And essentially, pragmatism is look, let me give you the definition of pragmatism as the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines it, okay? It's a reasonable and logical way of doing things, specific situations, not theories, as part of their definition. So pragmatism is just doing something in the way that works. It's very simple.
Like in a way to work, but also it should be moral, right? It has
ethical. Well, I'm giving you first pragmatism. Pragmatism is just getting something done that is very effective.
Okay.
And there's all kinds of pragmatism. You can be pragmatic and you can be evil, and that's not so very good. For example, if your neighbor is cutting the grass every Sunday morning at 6 a.m. and you want him to stop, you could just go next door and shoot him, and that would be the end of his cutting the grass at 6 in the morning. But that's not how we run our society. So the component of ethical pragmatism assumes that all human life has value. So that's what makes the difference. So ethical pragmatism, and the book is called The Essence of Ethical Pragmatism, is all about common sense. It's the common sense philosophy. It's not theoretical. It doesn't deal in theories. It deals in how you should live your life on a day-to-day basis by using your brain, which people do not do. It's built on using what we call critical thinking. And that is the essence of ethical pragmatism, is the use of critical thinking in everything you do. How would you explain
critical thinking?
Okay, well, I'm going to go back to Merriam-Webster, and I'll read this to you. Critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating information to guide belief and action. It involves questioning assumptions, identifying biases, and using logical reasoning to assess evidence rather than accepting arguments at face value. Now look, I can make it more simple than that. Critical thinking is not accepting everything on its surface, not acting like sheep. It makes you analyze, look, question, challenge every single thing that you hear, see, or feel, or smell. You don't trust anything but your senses, and you apply it with a process of thinking. And this is the thought process that's used, and I explain it in the book. You analyze after you've observed. So it's observe, analyze, evaluate, and conclude. That's what you run your life on. Observe, analyze, evaluate, and conclude. So everything you see, you question. And that's what critical thinking is. And people don't do it. They just follow along with the crowd, and they take everything at face value without ever challenging anything and asking the question why.
So you recommend a thought process for all kind of people and organization to make the right, is that a right moral decision?
Yes. Well, it's a pragmatic decision, and because of the ethical component of my philosophy, it has to consider the fact that all the human life has value. So yeah, it's everything you do requires you to observe, analyze, evaluate, and conclude. And you have to also ignore labels and ignore all emotions. Political parties and labels like conservative or liberal, all that stuff, that's nonsense. You just do what is going to work. And once you start doing this, it changes your life. I have lectured to students who have come to me after and said, I will never see things the same way again since I heard your lecture. And that's what it's about. It's about looking at something in an entirely different way than you did before and trying to get beyond it, beyond the surface of it, to see what's really happening, what the truth is. So again, that's the same thought process. And we do use it. We do use the thought process unconsciously. We don't realize it. If, let's say you were on your way someplace and you stopped off to get gasoline in your car, you went into the convenience store and you felt you were thirsty, so you reached up on a shelf to get a can or a bottle of soda, cold soda in a refrigerator perhaps, and you know that is probably 20 or 30% more in cost than if you bought it at the supermarket. But you observe it, you know what the price of it is, you analyze it and say, look, I'm thirsty now, I really like to have this soda to drink right now. You evaluate it, you say, well, is it worth paying an extra 20%, and it's maybe amounts to very little in actual money, and you conclude, yeah, it's worth it, why not? So you do that, and you have actually exercised your brain in that manner, in a very formal, organized way. The trouble is, when we don't do it consciously, we miss out on a lot of things that we should be doing in life.
So let me ask you another question. The book would give leaders a common sense framework to make better decisions to improve mankind. Is that the book can helping people, to make the right practical decision, right?
Well, it's not just people. Anybody, a government, a business, any institution should be using the same thought process and doing things in the same way. When we talk about observe, we're talking about getting the facts. You have to have all the facts before you can proceed on anything. If you're missing facts, you can't draw a conclusion. You're jumping 3 steps and you're going nowhere. You're just believing what someone tells you in the newspapers or on television or just gossip or rumors. It doesn't work. You have to know what it is that you're considering. So your observations have to consider knowing all the facts and getting reality of a situation and being accurate about that. Then you can make a proper analysis and you can use your brain, and then you can evaluate after you have your analysis and you can draw a conclusion. Now sometimes the conclusion is not to conclude because you just don't have enough information one way or the other to make a decision on that. And that's also possible, and that's part of the thought process.
That's wonderful explanation. So I hope people who wants to have a great future, you can read this book and help you to have the critical thinking way to solve the problem.
Just so that people don't get the wrong idea about this book, it's in 2 parts. The first part, which is the smaller of the 2 parts, justifies the philosophy to all the people who may be skeptical about a new philosophy. The second part gives all kinds of examples. In the book, for example, I have a way of someone making a decision, trying to make a decision on changing jobs. And I show how you list all the pros and all the cons and what you should look for, and you make an evaluation based on all those things, based on the practical realities of the situation, rather than on your emotions. You must ignore your emotions to effectively use your brain. And then there are other things, practical things. I take 11 people from history, starting with Confucius and ending with Martin Luther King Jr., that were ethical pragmatists. Maybe they didn't know about it, but they were, in how they did things. And you have to do the same thing when you're confronted with a set of circumstances which requires you to act.
That's wonderful. And as